When it comes to crossover clashes, few matchups get fans more hyped than anything else. Just like the clash between Monkey D. Luffy and Sung Jin-Woo. If Luffy with his signature straw hat and devilish grin faces off against Sung Jin-Woo, it'll be utterly bonkers and completely awesome. Luffy with his Gear 5 transformation is still trending among the otakus, but Jinwoo is on god level. One thing's for sure, this showdown between Luffy and Jinwoo promises to be a spectacle unlike any other. So, grab your snacks, buckle up, and get ready for a ride that'll leave you breathless and begging for more. Luffy's got some serious tricks up his sleeve thanks to his Gomu Gomu no Mi powers. He can stretch his body like taffy and pack a punch stronger than a cannonball. Plus, with his Gear 2nd and 3rd, he pumps his blood faster than a race car, making him faster and stronger than your average pirate. Then, we've got Sung Jin-Woo, who went from zero to hero. Thanks to his Shadow Monarch gig, he's got a whole army of spooky minions at his beck and call. Plus, he's got buffs on buffs with skills like Kandairu's Blessing, making him practically unkillable, and Stealth, which is like a high-tech invisibility cloak. Now, imagine these two powerhouses facing off. Luffy's bouncing around like a pinball, throwing punches that could knock down buildings. Meanwhile, Jinwoo's lurking in the shadows, his undead army at the ready. But Luffy's punches might send Jinwoo's minions flying, but they'll just keep coming back for more. And while Jinwoo's trying to sneak around, Luffy's haki might just give him a sixth sense for danger. But Luffy's bound to come out on top. Luffy's got that indomitable spirit and a knack for turning the tide of battle. So, while it might be a close fight, I'd bet my treasure on the rubber pirate any day. But ever heard of Nightmare Luffy? He stuffs himself with 100 shadows, turns into a juggernaut, and starts swinging swords like he's auditioning for a medieval action movie. And don't even get me started on his Gear 2nd. Post time skip, he's got this turbo mode that lets him zip around like a caffeinated cheetah. It's like someone strapped a rocket engine to a rubber band. Now, Sung Jin-Woo got skills too. His sprint ability is like hitting the fast forward button on life, giving him a 30% speed boost. Need to dash across town for a snack run? Jinwoo's your man. Then there's his Commander's Touch, which lets him play telekinetic puppet master with objects. Jinwoo's Dagger Toss turns him into a dagger-wielding whirlwind, dishing out damage like it's happy hour at a swordplay convention. So, Luffy's Nightmare Mode meets Jinwoo's Speed Boost. It's like a collision between a wrecking ball and a speedster on roller skates. Jinwoo's tossing daggers left and right, but Luffy's dodging like he's dancing through raindrops. Then, Luffy unleashes Gear 2nd, and suddenly it's like Jinwoo's in a hurricane of fists. But as much as Sung Jin-Woo's got going for him, Luffy's got that extra oomph. Luffy goes Gear 2nd, Jinwoo's dashing around like a madman, but Luffy's just too rubbery, too unpredictable. It's like trying to catch a greased up pig in a tornado. But this time too, Luffy's just got that straw hat swagger that puts him on top. But when it comes to a showdown with Luffy, he might just find himself outmatched, outmaneuvered, and out-Luffy'd. But Luffy's got that armament haki, which basically turns him into a walking tank. It's like he's wearing invisible armor that can punch through even the toughest defenses. He's got that Conqueror's haki, which is like having an intimidating aura that can knock weaker people out cold. But Sung Jin-Woo isn't one to be easily intimidated, especially with skills like Bloodlust and Dragon's Fear up his sleeve. When Luffy throws his armament haki-coated punches, Sung Jin-Woo's gonna feel it. But Jinwoo's Bloodlust can make even the bravest warriors quiver in their boots, dropping their stats like a hot potato. And then there's Dragon's Fear, which basically turns the battlefield into a panic zone. So, Luffy might find himself facing not just physical blows, but also a psychological onslaught. And let's not forget Jinwoo's memory manipulation. If he can mess with Luffy's head, making him question his own memories or even plant some false ones, well, that could really throw a wrench in Luffy's plans. Luffy's brute strength against Jinwoo's psychological warfare. And while Luffy's no pushover, Sung Jin-Woo's got a few tricks up his sleeve that could give him the upper hand. After all, it's not just about brawn, sometimes it's about playing the mind games too. But Luffy's got some serious upgrades post-time skip. With his Gear 3rd, he can pump himself up like a balloon, and now he's even figured out how to focus it just in his limbs, avoiding any unwanted miniaturization mishaps. Plus, he's got Gear 4th, where he pumps air into his muscles, cranks up his haki, and turns into this hulking, bouncy force to be reckoned with. He's knocked out some big names with that move. On the other hand, Sung Jin-Woo's got his own bag of tricks. His Shadow Monarch status lets him whip up some wicked armor made of shadows, turning him into this towering, dark figure that even gets mistaken for some high-level ruler's shenanigans. It's like he's got his own personal spooky armor kit. Now, Luffy comes charging in, all pumped up with Gear 4th, ready to lay the smackdown. But Jinwoo's not one to back down either. He summons up his shadowy armor, towering over Luffy like a brooding skyscraper. If these powers collide, it's gonna be like rubber meets shadow. Luffy's elasticity versus Jinwoo's ominous armor. It's like watching a giant rubber ball bouncing off a fortress of darkness. Sure, Jinwoo's got that imposing shadow armor, but let's be real here, Luffy's got the upper hand. He faced off against some seriously tough opponents and came out on top. Plus, that rubber resilience of his, hard to beat. We've got Tank Man, a beefy form that can take hits like a champ. I mean, who doesn't want to be able to shrug off attacks like they're nothing? Then there's Snake Man, where Luffy darts around like, well, a snake on turbocharge. Combine that with his future sight observation haki, and he's practically dancing through battles, dodging attacks before they even happen. But Sung Jin-Woo's shadow extraction game is going strong. This guy can literally pull shadows out of the fallen and turn them into his own personal army. It's like having your own spooky entourage wherever you go. Plus, he doesn't even need to worry about mana for this skill, which is pretty sweet. But he's only got 3 shots to pull it off, and if he fails, well, those shadows are gone for good. Luffy is bouncing around in his Snake Man form, throwing lightning-fast punches left and right. But then Jinwoo steps in, pulling shadows from Luffy's fallen foes, turning them against him. It'd be like a chaotic dance of fists and shadows, with both sides pulling out all the stops. But Jinwoo's got the upper hand here. Why? Because while Luffy's busy duking it out, Jinwoo can keep replenishing his forces with more and more shadows. It's like trying to fight a never-ending army of the undead. Sure, Luffy's tough, but even he might struggle against that kind of relentless onslaught. So, Sung Jin-Woo takes the crown. After all, you can't beat an opponent who just keeps coming back for more. Luffy's got that Ryo thing going on, which is like super focused haki that can pierce through practically anything. He's all about that internal destruction, making enemies crumble from the inside out. I mean, who needs to land a punch when you can just mess someone up from within? But Sung Jin-Woo's like the Pied Piper of the undead, drawing shadows out of fallen foes to build his own spooky army. It's like a reverse superhero power, turning the fallen into his own personal backup dancers. So, Luffy tries to punch his way through Sung Jin-Woo's soldiers, only to find out that they're not exactly the squishy type. They might absorb the impact like a bunch of rubber bands, leaving Luffy scratching his head wondering what just happened. But Sung Jin-Woo's shadow extraction doesn't work on super tough guys or those who are way stronger than him. Now, Luffy might not be the easiest target to extract shadows from, given his rubbery resilience and all-around toughness. But Sung Jin-Woo's got a trick up his sleeve. If he manages to find Luffy's weakness or catch him off guard, it could spell trouble for the Straw Hat wearing captain. Sung Jin-Woo's got the strategic advantage with his shadow army and ability to potentially exploit weaknesses. So, sorry Luffy, but Sung Jin-Woo might just have the upper hand in this round of Shadowy Showdown. And finally, Luffy's got his Gear 5, the ultimate trump card that even required him to take a dirt nap to unlock. His Gear 5 is just mind-blowing. He can turn himself all white and flex some armament and Conqueror's haki. Plus, he can do this cool trick of turning his surroundings into rubber. Luffy's got this mojo to turn living beings into rubber too. Imagine facing off against him and suddenly you're finding yourself stretchier than a rubber band. Not exactly the makeover most villains are hoping for, I bet. Now, Sung Jin-Woo's shadow extraction skill is straight out of a spooky fantasy tale. He's like the Grim Reaper's personal assistant, pulling shadows out of the afterlife to beef up his undead army. It's like having an army of ghostly bodyguards at your beck and call. Luffy might try to rubberize Jinwoo's shadows, but Jinwoo's no pushover with his undead army. He could swarm Luffy with his shadow soldiers, making it a creepy game of whack-a-mole. But let's face it, Luffy's got the upper hand here. Gear 5's versatility is just too much to handle. He can bounce around, dodging shadow attacks, and conjure up whatever he needs on the fly. But with shadow preservation, Jinwoo can hoard shadows in his own shadow and whip him out whenever he needs some backup. Then, there's Monarch's Domain, giving his shadow soldiers a whopping 50% stat boost when they're fighting close to him. And let's not forget Shadow Exchange, the nifty little trick that lets Jinwoo swap places with his shadows. Now, imagine if Luffy tries to turn Jinwoo's shadows into rubber. That'd be like trying to turn air into rubber. It just ain't happening. Plus, while Luffy's powers are all about bouncing and creating, Jinwoo's are all about control and manipulation. He can just snatch Luffy's rubbery creations and turn them against him with a snap of his shadowy fingers. So, while Luffy's Gear 5 is impressive, Sung Jin-Woo's shadow powers have the edge. He's like the shadowy puppet master pulling the strings, and in this showdown, he'd be the one pulling the victory.